Okay, let's face it, panic attacks have always been and always will be the main attraction, the main concern of those suffering from the anxiety condition. Panic attacks feel terrible, fill a person with dread, and leave them feeling completely exhausted. They seem to occur out of the blue, hit like a tornado, and leave a wake of destruction in their path. Anyone who has experienced panic attacks understands the struggle connected with this anxiety symptom. Most people courageously and yet blindly endure the suffering because they have never been taught how to cope with them, disable them, or prevent them. I spent years of my own life, wasted years, precious time, hiding from them, avoiding them, and hoping they would miraculously disappear. I had no idea I could take responsibility for them and control them completely. This never crossed my mind. To me, they were outside of myself. They were dependent on the place, the people, the weather. I looked at them, treated them as if they were an entity whose purpose was to attack me. I would cautiously leave the house, silently praying that I could go through another day without the panic finding me, with the fear always simmering beneath the surface. The fear that the attack would and could strike at any moment often incapacitated me. I was a victim of my own life, my own fears and thoughts. Well, that was then, and this is now. Let me happily and assuredly inform you that this is no longer me. I am no longer at the mercy of panic attacks, and I have discovered the key to coping by disarming these symptoms, these intrusive feelings in my life. Yes, I learned how to dissolve these interfering symptoms as easily as you would melt ice. I learned how to uncover the logic behind the attack and all anxiety symptoms and put them to rest. It was the day I discovered how to disable these attacks that I began to truly live again. Freedom. It was on this day that I gained a complete understanding of the anatomy of a panic attack and how to completely disarm the terror that had threatened me for so many years, making my life miserable. It was one of the warmest days in our region, with humidity off the charts. Life was rolling along as usual, me holding on tight as a passenger in the family car. Traffic was closing in on us, and the old familiar anxiety symptoms began to surface. My husband was driving and humming along with the radio. My small daughter was dozing in the back seat, and all I could feel, all I could think about was this initial twinge of anxiety that began to overtake me. At this point in time, I had had it with anxiety. I was exhausted from the panics, from the generalized anxiety, and from the exhausting feelings left in my body every single day. I needed out of this condition and was willing to do whatever I had to do to be through with this. Frankly, I was tired of fighting, and I was miserable from running from these symptoms. I was running out of ideas as well. Do I give in and take medications, which would render me miserable, or was there another path? I couldn't even think straight at this time. I clearly remember sitting very still in the car when the feeling overtook me, and by this time I knew there was no escape. It was then that I drew up all the courage I could possibly muster, preparing myself to fight these symptoms again, and yet I thought I'm too exhausted to fight. And besides, as many times as I confronted these storms, and they were storms, nothing ever seemed to work. I was wasting a lot of precious energy with little return. I had to face this on different terms, on my terms this time. But where were they? I remembered an old saying, "Whatever you resist persists." And I had been resisting like mad for years. Instead of fighting with all my energy and muscle power, I had to use my head this time. I had to be smart and make this time different. Instead of blindly lashing out at the panic or cringing from its effect, I began by taking a close look at what was going on with my body. I realized I was holding my breath. I was stiffening my body, and I was preparing for the worst, the onslaught. I was terrified and as stiff as a frightened animal. I was trying to cocoon in and hold tight, as a terrified cat might posture himself. My vision was affected and the road seemed blurry. Focusing was becoming a problem. The same pattern which followed each and every panic attack was unfolding before me. One body symptom after another was surfacing. The only difference was I was the observer this time. I was watching the results of adrenaline in my system. Yes, when a fear strikes, through a thought, sound, sight, whatever, the body shifts into fight or flight mode and releases adrenaline to either confront the fear or run to escape it. It was then that it hit me. Every time this adrenaline hit, my body responded by the same pattern of symptoms. I would panic. I would run. I would desperately try to push the reactions away. This time was different. I was tired of fighting with no results. Instead, I decided to let it do its worst. I was so fed up, I didn't care anymore. I had had it with anxiety ruling my life. I put down the gloves and looked it straight in the eye and thought, come and get me and get it over with. And the moment I said this, the moment I surrendered, the moment I gave myself over to it, it stopped. It was like someone blew out the candle. I had looked this terror in the eye with calm determination and surrendered completely. I embraced and gave in to every single sensation and fear. I met it with complete and utter acceptance and gave myself over to it completely, and it dissolved. I had melted it with surrender. I embraced it and experienced it through to the other side. I welcomed it in the most willing way I could muster. I learned surrender is not always defeat because I allowed myself complete surrender to the greatest enemy of my life and came out the winner. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done, and yet the simplest once I took the plunge. It was as if I allowed myself to fall backwards into the deep end of the water, and I floated to the top. I took the risk, and I won. Yes, what a relief to float to the top and remain on the top. It makes sense. If you stiffen your body in deep water, you'll sink. But when you loosen your muscles, you remain afloat. I was finally learning how to remain afloat in life without sinking in fear. Submitting with complete and utter acceptance will always dissolve the mantle of fear and allow you to remain wherever you may be for as long as you wish. You have, in essence, unplugged the cord which fuels the anxiety reaction. No more treading water, hoping to survive. You're safe no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing. I'm not sure what I expected to happen once I submitted to the anxiety, but once I did and it melted away, I became aware of this unexpected sensation of enormous power. I had faced my greatest fear, disarmed it, and the result was a powerful sensation unlike any other. I had taken control, and I was filled with a fantastic rush of relief mixed with strength. I had achieved this miracle I had wished for, and I had accomplished it on my own. No medications, no hypnosis, no magical herb, and best of all, no avoidance methods. I began to view this phenomenon with an entirely different point of view. I realized how one's body alters when you're faced with danger. It tightens as one holds their breath in fear of what might occur next. Posture changes, breathing changes, and thoughts change. Shoulders rise, breathing rate increases, muscles tighten, and fear fuels the cardiovascular system. Blood leaves the extremities as it rushes to the heart, lungs, and other vital organs. Digestion is slowed. Adrenaline, epinephrine, norepinephrine, and cortisol fuel the body with energy. The fight-or-flight syndrome is in progress. The body prepares to confront the perceived fear or escape. In the case of anxiety, the body is being fueled by all the proper chemicals in response to fear messages sent by the brain, but the messages are unfounded. They are the product of your own interpretation of an event. The body is flooded with these chemicals, but is not fighting or fleeing. Instead, it's remaining still and yet filled with energy, similar to a motorboat tied to the dock while one's foot is on the gas pedal. We're not going anywhere, yet the energy to do so is in high gear. No wonder you feel such tension with anxiety. In essence, by surrendering, I changed the dynamics. Instead of sending my brain messages of danger and fear, I altered the response by welcoming the anxiety, which is merely adrenaline being released into the system in response to your interpretation of the situation. Change the way you think and you change the reaction. It all begins with a thought. Welcome any anxiety reaction and you disarm its power. You shut down the adrenaline which fuels the reaction. It makes perfect sense. I surrendered. I gave up the battle. My body immediately turned off the fear response. Think about it. Who would tense up when welcoming a friend? Who would hold their breath when embracing a friend? There'd be no danger, no terror attached to this meeting. Who would stiffen when a friend approached? No one. Only when we fear an enemy would we react in such a fashion. I turned this enemy into my friend and was rewarded with the calm, relaxed feelings my body would exhibit if I actually was meeting a friend. I literally turned what was formerly an adrenaline response into a more comfortable experience. I learned how to disarm anxiety and dissolve my self-created terror. Yes, it might be difficult to believe, but I created these feelings by interpreting every incident into a fearful one. But the good news is, I realized what I was doing and I changed. And you also have this power, the choice to change your perception and create positive reactions. I remember sitting there in the car that day after taking full control of that situation and feeling such strength, such power, as if someone handed me the keys to the greatest secret on earth. I had located my own personal power. I felt elation and inner strength, feelings I hadn't experienced in years. I wanted to shout, to applaud, and to dance. I figured out the answer. I experienced panic through and cut it off before it reached the crescendo. I cut it off at the pass and lived to tell about it. This approach not only worked for panic attacks, but for all anxiety reactions. It even worked when I was fearful about confrontations at work or socially. It helped me remain calm when I was confronted with normal life stresses. It was a tool that aided me ever since. I cut off the fuel for anxiety reactions and my life began to change dramatically. This was how it all began. The road to recovery became much easier once I realized how to turn off these reactions, and I became less reactive as the weeks wore on. I lost my fear of the attacks after realizing I had found the key to turning off the response. And when something ceases to matter, it no longer holds the power to frighten you. It lost its importance when I knew it could be disarmed. The door no longer remained open. My technique had slammed it shut. Sensitization began to ebb, and I was less reactive since my nerves had a chance to heal. Stresses and shocks didn't have the same impact on me. I was more resilient and less reactive. This tried and true method worked for me time and time again. The stronger my acceptance, the more control I maintained. In the beginning, my body was still shocked from years of suffering from anxiety symptoms and attacks. So complete desensitization took a while, but it did occur. Each time my acceptance grew a little stronger and my learned fear a little less. My acceptance, my willingness to embrace these feelings was so strong that there was never a doubt in my mind. These interruptions stopped once and for all because I was no longer producing fear which fueled them. The panic reactions lost their life force, their fire, and I lost the fear which supplied them for so long. The actual anatomy of a panic attack begins a long time before the attack or reaction. Once you understand the circumstances of an attack, you'll be able to avoid a buildup of stress and maintain a calm environment, both body and mind. Stress is merely a signal alerting our body to a buildup of pressure. These signals surface in the form of headaches, backaches, or a feeling of being on edge. We often ignore these signals, and our body creates a strong signal, much stronger, such as a panic attack, in order to obtain our full and undivided attention. And it works. Who could possibly ignore a panic reaction? If we were to slow down, regroup, change our diet, nutrition, stop skipping meals, stop ingesting stimulating substances, and work out emotional upheavals which elicit strong emotions, we might have a chance to ward off the buildup of anxiety reactions. In essence, we create a stable environment, a less fertile atmosphere for the cultivation of anxiety reactions. Sensitization, a heightened reaction to stimuli, and increased sensitivity often occurs after extended periods of stress. We become more sensitive, more reactive to stimuli. An example would be a headache, irritability, slight wave of dizziness, short-tempered, insomnia, or racing heart. These are all classified as first fears. They're short-lived and always pass if we don't fuel them with what-if thinking. When we begin worrying over these sensations and adding what-if thoughts to the mix, we began to fuel the anxiety. This is called second fears, or fear of the first fear. All second fears begin with what if. Be aware of all your what if thinking during the day. These sentences result in the release of adrenaline. This type of thinking fuels anxiety reactions. Again, knowledge is power. Acknowledging what if thoughts serves to decrease them. Become conscious of the way you view things and your inner thoughts. You have power over the way you perceive things. If a person experiences a twinge of anxiety in response to constant stress and pressure, this twinge will always spend itself, as we stated, if the individual does not add fuel to the fire with what if thinking. But the memory might grab a hold of the fear associated with the initial episode and store it. In other words, the traumatic event made an impression. The fear was so upsetting that it made an imprint on one's memory. Sometimes this may surface if the person finds themselves in a similar situation, under similar circumstances. Out of the blue, they believe, another twinge of anxiety surfaces. Little do they know that a sight, sound, or a scent may have triggered this recurrence due to memory and the imprint, the initial impression. This means nothing. This is merely a signal to use your coping skills and alleviate the reaction in the same way. Sensitization causes one to become susceptible to outside stimuli. Swift reactions result. A telephone ringing, a door slamming, a flash of sunlight. All are small shocks to the body which normally have little impact. When sensitized, these shocks carry an exaggerated reaction because the body is more sensitive, more reactive due to the buildup of stress. The heart may race or even pound, taking time to settle down. One sweats, or their stomach muscles clutch and their legs may even tremble. These are all reactions to stress. Naturally, one always rules out a physical source for these reactions before assuming every symptom is anxiety related. Thoughts often run into the area of what if negative statements. What if this symptom becomes worse? What if it never stops? Or what if they miss something and I'm really sick? With each what if statement, adrenaline increases, as does symptoms, until they reach a crescendo, and a full-blown panic episode has been created, leaving one feeling exhausted and defeated. This could have been avoided if the individual were to let go of the first fear, allow it to spend itself, and be careful not to add second what-if fears to the situation. A panic attack would have been avoided and control maintained. A simple change of what if my heart races to so what if my heart races is enough to lessen the fuel which culminates in an attack. In essence, this is what I stumbled across when I faced my panic attack that day in the car. I began to experience those twinges, first symptoms or first fears, and for the first time in my life, let them have full reign. I surrendered completely to them by not adding second what-if fears. By doing so, I interrupted and capped the usual process which normally led to a panic attack. Without the what-if second fears, there was no escalation. The escalation of symptoms was stopped cold in its tracks. The episode was aborted and I remained in control. I gave up the what-if sentences of fear. You're able to think when these twinges occur, and you are able to choose. Next time, choose to surrender. Choose to give up the fight. Recovery begins when sensitization ebbs. Healing occurs when you choose to give up the habit of what-if thinking. Fear, the catalyst of sensitization, is no longer an issue, and in the most remarkable fashion, the body becomes less reactive. Reactions begin to shrink down to normal intensity until the trigger for anxiety reactions is lowered to a mere flicker. Reserved normal intensity. Now we know what these reactions are, what they're not, and what to do about them. And most of all, we no longer fear them. The source of fight or flight syndrome has been located and put on notice. You begin to breathe freely, maintain a normal oxygen-carbon dioxide balance, and lose the threat and feelings of dread which accompany the buildup of a panic situation. I experienced this power the day I let go and submitted to the sensations. I embraced it all. I grabbed the reins and I won. The lessons of dealing with panic attacks have been invaluable to me. Your fearful reaction is fuel. You own them. Yes, you own these attacks because your thoughts undoubtedly bring them on, but they will also crush them. Whenever you give yourself over to these feelings and embrace them 100%, not 80 or 90%, but the full 100, you'll be dousing water on the flames of anxiety. It's the only way to go. Once again, this method is simple. Use this as your recipe when you feel the symptoms of stress sneaking up on you. This is your formula for success over panic. Number 1, embrace. Welcome it. Accept it. Allow it in without fighting it, and be willing to accept all of the feelings. You surrender to it and submit. Do the opposite you've been doing all along. This is not giving up or doing nothing at all. This is passive action because you're doing something positive through a deliberate, intentional action. It's a choice, a route past anxiety permanently, one you may have overlooked, but it's never too late. Number 2, experience. Let it move through you without resistance. Slacken your body and allow it to move through you as you continue to give up the fight. You experience it out as it passes through you without any resistance at all. Go with the flow as an objective, unaffected observer. There's no need to hold your breath anymore from fear of what will happen. Breathe freely and calmly as this thing you used to fear is disabled and melts before your very eyes. The crescendo that you normally expect will not occur. Each time you experience it through, you become stronger. Each time you allow these feelings to wash over you and through you, you'll be building your inner strength. It never had a chance. It will only dissolve in the process. Breathe in smoothly. Loosen your stomach muscles. Unclutch. Lower your shoulders and unclench your jaw. Hold the breath, and when you exhale, bring down your shoulders, loosen the jaw, and allow the stomach to sink. Become a rag doll and watch the tension melt. Number 3, exercise. Burn off the excess adrenaline through moderate exercise as you walk off the energy created by the initial twinge of anxiety. The first fear. Within merely 3 to 5 minutes, your body will burn off this adrenaline by reabsorbing it back into the body. If you find yourself confined in a car, desk, or office, then stretch. Any type of movement will expel the energy. Walking is merely the most convenient. Number 4, enforce. Repetition is the true path through this for permanent recovery. Reestablish your power by using it consistently. It becomes easier each time. Continue moving forward because each time you do so, you'll strengthen your resolve. Reinforcing will reinforce these techniques. Yes, the 4 steps: embrace, experience, exercise, and enforce. This is the formula. This is the key. You were doing battle all along, and the result was exhaustion and further panic. Shift your approach and change your life. It's so easy to reverse the approach and bring peace and calm back into your life. What a lift! What a relief! What power! Remember also, you carry your comfort zone wherever you go. There is no such thing as a safe person or place or thing. It's never the place. It's how you perceive the place. Your thinking in the place is crucial. Be aware of your inaccurate perceptions and your what-if thoughts. Never run from panic or avoid anxiety reactions. I would much rather hear you experienced it through and came out on the other side. Avoidance leads to defeat. Experience out your fear. This is the way to peace of mind and true emotional fitness. Wellness and health are yours with acceptance. Many believe anxiety feelings come out of nowhere. There are a variety of factors involved, many you might be unaware of, which often produce feelings which seem to arise out of the blue. But after further investigation, you'll run into a logical explanation for each occurrence. Your diet plays a large role in the way you feel. A healthy diet is not always the same as a healthy anti-anxiety diet. It's important to select foods which maintain a calm mind, body, and straying from this type of diet, especially when sensitized, often leads to reactive results. This is why we call our diet the anxiety neutralizing diet. It neutralizes all phases of the anxiety condition and returns the mind and body back to complete stabilization. You begin to feel like your old self again. Behavior is also a factor. Communication in relationships, both personal, social, and work-related, may upset the delicate system of an already sensitized personality. Strong emotions such as anger and grief often trigger reactions. Learning to deal effectively will often offset these anxiety reactions. Lingering fear of symptoms might be simmering under the surface. In one split second, this fear might rear its ugly head due to a sight, sound, or a thought. A memory might be jogged to the forefront without conscious thought, eliciting a reaction. And for women, there are hormonal factors as well. This is why, no matter what the trigger, the surefire way of eliminating this condition permanently is to deal with the reactions. Eventually, you'll completely understand what your triggers are and how to offset them swiftly and effectively. Also, once the fear is eradicated, the twinges, which often arise out of what you think is nowhere, will fade just as they came, because they will have lost their importance since you're no longer fueling them. You'll be able to brush them away without the slightest thought or worry. This formula became my protocol for relief. It's never let me down. It eventually has become second nature, a part of me. It's become internalized. All you have to do is observe your symptoms and embrace them fully. Experience them through. This is true power. In combination with diet, nutrition skills, which we'll discuss later on in the program, and minor lifestyle changes, you too will regain full control of your life again. Remember, there is no ultimate. There is no panic attack which will take you away and render you helpless. You've already experienced the worst. There are no surprises. There is no other shoe about to fall. You've already experienced everything there is concerning anxiety. You have lived through it yesterday. You could live through it tomorrow if you had to, but why not experience it through properly and shut it down permanently? And remember, there's good stress and bad stress. Good stress being job promotions, parties, moving, marriage, happy events. Bad stress, of course, is illness, arguing, anger, and the like. But arousal is arousal, and the symptoms of arousal or stress are identical. The only difference is we don't mind feeling thrilled or ecstatic. If we won the lottery, we'd be elated. Even with the physical symptoms, our hearts may pound, we may sweat, and our hands may shake, but we tell ourselves we're excited and release the fear messages. Adrenaline response simmers down and all returns to normal. This is because our interpretation is positive and we're reacting happily without fear. And for those who experience that constant undercurrent of anxiety, that simmering under the surface, which doesn't culminate in panic, this is the same remedy. The explanation is logical as well. When one centers in on constant checking in, what if thinking and worry thoughts, the adrenaline is slowly released in small increments all day long, leaving one feeling sensitized and anxious all day from these little shocks. This never builds into panic, but is just as intrusive. Through these methods and alterations in diet and nutrition, one will easily eradicate this symptom as well. Last but not least, never be fooled into believing you are ill. Do not confuse anxiety with illness and fear that moving around will make the symptoms worse. It's the opposite. Do your steps to quell the attack, but continue to move forward. Remember, exercise burns off excess energy created by worried thoughts. Stretching also helps if you're sitting at your desk or in your car or unable to walk around. When you move, you disperse adrenaline as your body reabsorbs it. Within 3 to 5 minutes, with minor movement, the adrenaline is metabolized and reabsorbed into the body. Anxiety quickly dissipates as you calm down again. That's why exercise is so wonderful. It prevents adrenaline buildup as well. Just remember, panic attacks are merely elusive phantoms. They begin with a thought. Show them no fear and they will dissipate. There are no medications, no magic formulas, no herbal remedies as powerful as the natural, permanent recovery approach. You own the power. It's time to use it and continue to do so. Have a wonderful week.